Remember to give the video a thumbs up, share your insights in the comments, and subscribe to keep up with our newest narratives. I never thought I would encounter this kind of situation at 62. Life, it seems, was meant to follow a certain script by this point. Days begin with nurturing my garden, followed by tranquil afternoons immersed in books, and evenings shared with my husband, Mark, as we reflect on the memories we've created together. Yet, one evening, an intimate dialogue transformed everything, making me reevaluate my understanding of the world. The journey began at a corporate gala organized by Mark's company. He dedicated over 30 years to that place, steadily climbing the ladder with relentless commitment. Richard Caldwell, his boss, exuded a subtle yet commanding presence, a man with whom I had merely shared courteous greetings at past gatherings. In his mid-60s, he stood tall and distinguished, exuding a quiet confidence that appeared entirely effortless. The gala took place at a luxurious hotel in downtown Chicago, where grand chandeliers illuminated the room, creating a warm ambience for the elegantly attired guests. The atmosphere buzzed with lively chatter, the gentle clinking of glasses, and the soothing strains of a jazz band playing softly in the corner. These events didn't really resonate with me. I favored the coziness of my own space. However, Mark had been quite persistent, so I found myself donning a simple navy blue dress and consenting to join him. At first glance, everything appeared to be perfectly ordinary. Mark found himself engrossed in conversations with his colleagues, while I busied myself engaging with the other spouses. Everything changed when Richard came up to me. "Evelyn, could we chat for a moment?" He inquired, his resonant voice cutting through the clamor of the room. I paused. Just a brief pause? What could Mark's supervisor possibly want from me? With a polite smile and a nod, I followed him down a side corridor, steering clear of the bustling main ballroom. The atmosphere was more serene in this place, the echoes of the celebration gradually diminishing in the distance. He led me to an intimate lounge, a snug space adorned with soft lighting, a crackling fireplace, and plush leather armchairs. A quiet tension lingered in the atmosphere, palpable yet understated. My heart raced slightly as I settled into the chair opposite him. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything crucial," he said, giving a slight, somewhat anxious smile. "Not in the slightest," I reassured him, yet I couldn't quell the intrigue stirring within me. "What thoughts are occupying your mind?" He exhaled softly, his hands moving together in a gesture of contemplation, as if he were on the brink of finding the perfect expression. At last, he found his voice. "It's concerning Mark." At that moment, I sat up straighter in my chair, a knot forming in my stomach. "Is everything all right?" He paused, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. "Not quite. However, there is a crucial detail I believe you ought to be aware of." The gravity of his words was palpable even before they left his lips. His expression held a weight that disturbed me, a subtle fervor that sent my heart racing. "Evelyn," he went on, his tone soft yet resolute. "I have been acquainted with Mark for quite a while. I have observed him cultivate his professional journey, uplift his peers, and nurture his family. Amidst everything, I've observed a particular detail." I took a deep breath. "What is it exactly?" He leaned in a bit, his eyes fixed intently on me. "He fails to recognize your worth as he ought to." The words settled heavily within me, a weight pressing down on my heart. A sudden catch in my breath sent a rush of defensiveness coursing through me. I couldn't grasp it, I stammered. "Mark is an excellent partner. He has consistently been." Richard gave a slight nod. "I am aware of that fact. But tell me, Evelyn, when was the last moment he genuinely recognized your essence? Not merely in the role of his wife, but as the extraordinary woman you truly are." I parted my lips to speak, yet silence enveloped me. He pressed on, his tone gentler this time. "Your gaze lingers on him, even when he's oblivious to it all. I've seen you linger in the shadows at gatherings like this, as he immerses himself in his tasks. You invest so much, but does he reciprocate?" A tightness gripped my throat. I felt the urge to speak out, to assert that he was mistaken, yet a deep uncertainty within me held me back. "I don't want to overstep," Richard said, leaning back a bit. Yet, there are moments when an outsider perceives what those within cannot grasp. I let out a deep breath, thoughts swirling in my head. Richard examined my expression, then gave a subtle, understanding smile. "Evelyn, you are worthy of recognition." The words resonated in a way I had not known was possible within me. For the first time in ages, uncertainty washed over me, leaving me unsure of my emotions. I remained still, paralyzed. Richard's words lingered in my thoughts, awakening feelings I wasn't prepared to face. "It's your time to shine." Had I truly remained in the shadows for such an extended period? I aimed to dismiss his remarks as nothing more than a casual observation, a sincere yet misdirected gesture of goodwill. Yet, beneath the surface, a part of me understood he was correct. Mark was a decent individual, a diligent supporter. He had consistently demonstrated a sense of stability and dependability. Yet in those hushed intervals, the significant ones, when was the last time he genuinely gazed upon me? When was the last time he recognized the little efforts I made to nurture our life and keep it vibrant? The manner in which I arranged his shirts precisely to his preference? The manner in which I adorned our home with his cherished belongings? How I had supported him through every professional achievement and now just observe? I cleared my throat, suppressing the knot that had taken residence within. "Richard, He raised a hand, halting my words. "I certainly don't want to put you in an awkward position, Evelyn. However, I found it impossible to remain silent." I exhaled gently. "Your candor is truly valued." I finally spoke, though my voice came out softer than I had meant it to. "Mark and I have shared our lives for many years. Marriage encompasses much more than mere visibility. It revolves around dedication and consistency." Richard gave a slight nod. "I understand and appreciate that." He leaned in a bit, his eyes fixed and steady. "Have you ever paused to consider what it is that you genuinely desire?" The inquiry hung in the air, suspended between us. What I desired? For countless years, I dedicated myself to understanding Mark's needs, fulfilling the demands of our marriage, and meeting the expectations placed upon me. I had never really taken the time to reflect on my desires. I released a quiet, anxious chuckle. "Richard, this is certainly an intriguing discussion to engage in at a corporate gala." That brought a smile to his face. "I guess that's the case." Yet, an inner voice urged me to express it. A pause lingered in the air, punctuated solely by the gentle crackling of the fire. He let out a deep sigh as he rose to his feet. "I suppose it's time for you to return to your tasks." I stood there, my hands trembling slightly as I smoothed my dress. Indeed, Mark will be curious about my whereabouts. Richard nodded, yet an enigmatic quality lingered in his gaze. "Evelyn has made me a promise." I inclined my head. "What is that?" "Please take my words seriously. Consider this." After a moment of contemplation, I gave a slow nod. "Understood." He offered a subtle smile before moving aside, indicating the door with a gentle motion. As I strolled by him, I sensed the warmth of his presence alongside me, the heaviness of our conversation lingering on my heart. The gala continued to buzz with energy upon my return. Mark remained precisely in the spot I had last seen him, engrossed in discussion with his coworkers. At first, he was oblivious to my presence. I lingered at a distance for a moment, observing him intently. His expression was lively, his hands gesturing passionately as he communicated. It was an aspect of him I had always cherished, his fervor, his determination. Yet, I found myself reflecting on Richard's words. Had Mark ever gazed at me in such a manner? As he finally looked my way, he offered a brief nod before redirecting his attention to the discussion at hand. A change stirred within me. Richard had sown a seed, and despite my efforts to dismiss it, I was aware that it was already starting to flourish. The journey back was serene. Mark sat next to me, his hands tightly holding the wheel, his eyes locked on the shadowy path before us. The city lights danced by in a haze, yet my thoughts wandered far away. Richard's words resonated in my mind, his voice persisting in a manner I couldn't quite dispel. "You are worthy of recognition." I cast a fleeting look at Mark. He appeared weary, a subtle line of tension etched between his brows. After almost 4 decades of marriage, I had committed every nuance of his face to memory. The defined contours of his jaw, the delightful crinkles around his eyes when laughter escaped him, the firm press of his lips as he focused intently. But when was the last time he had truly seen me? He cleared his throat, shattering the stillness that enveloped the room. "Did you enjoy yourself this evening?" The inquiry took me by surprise. He posed the question after each event, each gathering, each dinner party, almost as if it were a duty rather than a true interest. For a moment, I paused before responding. It was quite captivating. He nodded with a distant expression. "Excellent, excellent." And just like that, the dialogue came to a close. I shifted my focus back to the window, observing the city fade into the distance as we journeyed toward the serene suburbs. Upon arriving home, Mark followed his usual routine. He removed his jacket, placed his keys on the counter, and made his way to his office for a final glance at his emails. I lingered in the kitchen, my gaze fixed on the vacant spot where he had recently stood. I felt no anger towards him. Not quite. Mark had consistently embodied this nature, devoted to his craft, unwavering in his habits. He had provided me with a fulfilling existence, a stable existence. Yet Richard's words had stirred something within me, something I could no longer suppress. I strolled into the bedroom and glimpsed my reflection in the mirror. At the age of 62, my once vibrant auburn hair now bore streaks of silver. Subtle lines etched upon my face, echoes of the years I had experienced. Yet my gaze remained unchanged. In those moments, I discovered a detail that had long escaped my attention: isolation. I had always thought this was merely a facet of growing older, this subtle retreat into the shadows, this slow drift into the mundane. Yet now, for the very first time, I found myself questioning, was it? The following morning, as Mark departed for work, he pressed a kiss to my cheek and remarked, "I'll be home late. A significant client meeting is on the agenda." I inclined my head slightly, a faint smile gracing my lips. "Take care and stay safe." And then he vanished. I lingered in the doorway for a while before retreating back inside. Typically, my day would be occupied with tasks like running errands, tidying up the house, or tending to the garden. Yet today, a sense of restlessness washed over me. Before I could rationalize my way out of it, I grabbed my phone and dialed a number I never imagined I would. Richard picked up on the second ring. "Evelyn?" His voice held a subtle hint of astonishment. I inhaled deeply. "Would you be available to share a cup of coffee?" A moment of silence lingered, and then gently, naturally. An hour later, I found myself seated opposite him at a serene cafe by the lake. The aroma of roasted coffee beans mingled with the scent of fresh pastries, while outside, the autumn leaves twirled gracefully in the gentle breeze. Richard regarded me with a subtle intrigue. "I had my doubts about whether you would reach out." Coffee, observing the way cream danced and merged with the deep, rich liquid, was uncertain about making the call. Slow breath. "Words have been on my mind lately." Expression was a complete enigma. Moment of uncertainty, I finally locked eyes with him. Spark danced in his eyes, an elusive quality I couldn't quite identify. Not claiming to regret my life, I interjected softly. "And I have created a solid foundation, something genuine." Point in my journey, I believe I lost the ability to desire something for my own sake. Body forward just a touch. "What comes next?" I took a deep breath. "At this moment? I'm uncertain." A hush enveloped us, punctuated solely by the faint murmur of voices in the background. At last, Richard uttered a few words, his tone soft and subdued. "My only wish is for your happiness." I gazed at him, truly gazed at him. A man entered my life without any justification to meddle, without any cause to utter the words he did, save for the fact that he perceived something within me that I had yet to recognize myself. In that moment, it dawned on me that a decision lay before me. I found myself seated, gazing at Richard from across the petite cafe table, my fingers encircling the comforting warmth of my coffee cup. "My only wish is for your happiness." His words lingered in the atmosphere, weighty yet soft, reminiscent of a truth I had been evading for far too long. For years, I convinced myself that satisfaction was sufficient, that safety, consistency, and devotion formed the foundation of a fulfilling existence. Indeed, they were. Yet Richard had revealed something within me, something I hadn't realized was absent. A desire to experience emotions. I inhaled deeply, feeling the heaviness of my reflections bearing down on me. Richard, I'm at a loss with all of this. His gaze became gentle. There's no need for you to take any action, Evelyn. Contemplate the elements that bring you joy. When was the last occasion you indulged in something solely for your own enjoyment? I began to speak but hesitated. When did it last occur? For years, I dedicated myself to ensuring that Mark received the support he needed, that his career, his aspirations, and his entire world stayed whole. I had crafted a life of structure, of consistency. But what about myself? A sip of my coffee enveloped me, its rich, bitter warmth anchoring my thoughts for a fleeting moment. I find myself questioning my identity beyond the confines of my marriage. I found myself admitting it, the words catching me off guard. Richard offered me a subtle, understanding smile. Perhaps it's the moment to discover. I released a soft, anxious chuckle. That sounds absolutely chilling. Perhaps. Yet, it's also thrilling, wouldn't you agree? I chose not to respond. I was unable to. Ultimately, I understood that he was correct. We lingered in quietude for a time. The world beyond continued its relentless motion, just as it always had. Vehicles glide by, laughter fills the air, and the breeze dances through the shimmering autumn foliage. Life moved forward without a moment to contemplate. Yet perhaps, for the very first time, it was necessary for me to do so. At last, I placed my cup aside and locked eyes with him. The future remains a mystery, Richard. Yet, I am aware that it's time for me to embrace life once more. A smile danced at the edge of his lips. That's all I hoped you would come to understand. That evening, as Mark returned home, I was already seated at the kitchen table, anticipating his arrival. He hardly glanced my way as he placed his briefcase on the ground and relaxed his tie. It was a long day, he murmured. I feel utterly drained. I observed him for a brief moment, this individual with whom I had crafted a life, this individual I had cherished for years. And yet, as he navigated the rooms of the house, an unbridgeable gap lingered between us, a divide I had failed to recognize expanding over the years. I inhaled deeply. Mark, may we have a conversation? He hesitated, casting a fleeting look in my direction. Concerning what topic? I gulped. Who are we? His brows knitted together in a subtle display of concern. What about us? After a moment of doubt, I finally voiced the thoughts that had been simmering within me since the previous evening. I feel unseen, Mark. He blinked, momentarily taken aback. What is happening? I sense that I've devoted so much time to being the partner who stands by you, who maintains the flow, who ensures that everything in our life remains balanced. And I truly cherish you. Yet, at some point in my journey, I faded from view. His brow furrowed, unmistakably taken by surprise. Evelyn, what's the source of this? I shook my head in disbelief. It has existed for quite a while. I simply never allowed myself to voice it openly. He settled into the chair opposite me, his hand gliding over his face in a thoughtful gesture. I was unaware that you had these feelings. I observed him intently. Have you ever pondered? He remained quiet. In that instant, a painful truth dawned on me. Mark was not an unkind partner. He didn't intend to be cruel or neglectful. He had merely taken for granted, as I had, that marriage signified a predictable pattern. That solace was sufficient. That we no longer needed to connect with one another as we used to. Yet, that didn't feel like true existence. That was not love. Not any longer. What do you mean? He finally inquired, his tone careful. I took a deep breath. It's time for me to reclaim my life. His complexion dulled a bit. Are you sharing my information? After a moment of doubt, I simply shook my head. The future remains a mystery, Mark. However, I am aware that I cannot continue to appear this way. For this union to endure, a transformation is essential. He gazed at me intently for what felt like an eternity. For the first time in years, I noticed a spark flicker in his eyes. Awakening. Perhaps there was an opportunity to resolve this. Perhaps we did not. Yet, after many years, I felt prepared to uncover the truth.